The recording, the recording has started.
Good evening. This is the monthly meeting of the Police Commissioners Advisory Committee for July 2025. My name is Paul Yee. I'm one of the co-chairs. I'm going to have everybody in the room introduce themselves, and I'll let my other co-chair introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Ron Wilkinson, the other co-chair, and that's pretty much it. So why don't you go next, Joe?
Joe Figler, PCAC.
Jonathan,
I'm John Hilliard, a member of the PCAC.
Tim,
Kimberly Richardson, PCAC.
Any other members online at this time, Sarah?
No, I'm in the room. I'm the staff liaison and I work for the Office of Diversity. And then Ann Braga is in the room.
Okay.
So is Susan Harris, both online. Oh,
Okay.
Paul Campbell is about to be admitted.
Great. So those are the introductions. Just going to our agenda. I'm going to ask for approval of the minutes. Have everybody looked at the minutes of June 30th, 2025? And anybody has any comments or amendments to the minutes? I don't hear anything from any of the members. Could I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve. Ron Wilkinson.
Thank you, Ron. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by John Hillard. Okay, and why don't we go around the room and for the vote? Ron, how do you vote on approval of the minutes?
Aye.
John? Joe. Excuse me. Yes, John.
Aye.
And Kimberly online.
I abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Okay, and the co-chair, Paul Yee, votes aye. So the minutes are approved. The next item is public comment, and it's a 3-minute 3-minute limit on each comment. And Sarah, do we have any
There is one member of the public in the room, Celeste L. Kale of Brookline News.
Okay,
Celeste,
great.
if you wish,
Welcome.
if you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. And I will read the thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person is limited to 3 minutes. Sorry. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes have been met, there is an opportunity at the conclusion of PCAC's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but more likely to work with staff in order to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at this time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to Sarah Kaplan, the PCAC's staff liaison, expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Any person wishing to speak must begin their comment by identifying themselves with their full name, either their Brookline precinct number or street address, and the specific topic on which they wish to speak. The board encourages, but does not require, that remote users turn on their video when commenting. In that time, David Pilgrim has also joined us. And Scott Ananian is now being admitted. Hold on, give me a second. Let me make Scott a co-host. And let me remind the two members of the public that if they wish to speak, they may use the raise hand function. to let me know that they wish to speak, and then I can unmute them.
I don't hear anybody that wish to speak on
I
members of.
don't see any movement in the participants list, so I assume we're fine.
Thank you. Turning to the next item on the agenda, reports, the monthly civilian feedback report. Sarah,
Yes, so we received two responses from June 17th through July 16th when I took this report. They are we now have 59 total responses on through this feedback form. The two responses we received were both very negative. They both had very negative experiences, rather. One was received on July 1st at 12:54 p.m., and the other very negative response was received on July 7th at 10:59 p.m. They are in the report on hold on, I'm working my way through. Beginning on page 11 and going through page 14. Does the committee wish that I read each response? Like, would they like me to read each response? How would you like me to go through this?
I don't think it's necessary. It's posted.
Yeah.
Both responses are provided by bicyclists who had complaints about the treatment by Brookline Police. We will forward those to the police department. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is we'll review the complaints that we recently received via the PCAC complaint form, and also the further report of May 25 complaint about the treatment of juvenile shoplifting suspects. And Ron Wilkerson must provide that report.
Okay, so let's start with the May 23rd, 2025 shoplifting report that shoplifting complaint report that came in last month after reading the text, which was basically that a mother filed a complaint saying that her teenage son and his friends were questioned by the Brookline Police about a shoplifting that occurred in the area, and she was concerned that they were not treated courteously. And after reviewing the body cam footage, she ended up withdrawing the complaint. But a question came up last month where it's mentioned in the report that an assistant principal intervened with the kids, and the question was, where did the assistant principal come from? Because the theft was at a Target, that kind of thing. And so I did ask the Ray Richards, who's the person, the lieutenant who wrote up the report about that, and he said, yes, it was not on school grounds, but it was near a charter school, and the assistant principal happened to walk by and recognize the students and just kind of went to see what was going on, and that was how that went. So that's the update for that particular report.
Ron,
Yeah.
before Scott's hand is up. I'm not.
Okay, Scott.
Sorry, I was actually just going to ask about the previous item, but we can come back to it after you finish your report, perhaps.
Okay, the previous item meaning the what Sarah talked about?
Yeah, so just because I can do it quickly, just because both of them had to do with reports from bicyclists, I was wondering if we could put on the agenda just an update from either Deputy Superintendent Campbell or from the chief herself on generally how the police department handles complaints from bicyclists, and get some reassurance that as we forward them on, that they're it seems like there's a little bit of a pattern here, and doing what we can to sort of make sure it's addressed.
Okay, so that's noted.
I could speak to it tonight.
Oh, go ahead.
Put it on the agenda, but Ron, why don't you finish and we'll go back to it.
Okay, as you wish. So, two reports came in, this month. One is dated July 15th. And that actually also, suggests it was a Survey Monkey, complaint, which is interesting because it apparently didn't come on the set that Sarah had, but whatever, it did come in. And it says that, a mother and a 5-year-old were at a were at a construction site, and felt that the police officer was rude to her when she asked a question about how to navigate past the construction. And she felt that he was actually yelling at her, and that frightened her little 5-year-old son. And the report says that the investigation couldn't really proceed because there wasn't enough information. There were a lot of police officers and crossing guards on duty that day, and there was insufficient information to identify the officer. And it says that only one body-worn camera was activated from that whole area, and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with that particular incident. I find that regrettable. I would have liked to have had more information. This is where we could encourage people to give more identifying information so we could follow up. So that was one. And then on June 21st, this sounds serious. It says a person left a voicemail claiming that she was illegally detained and searched by the police, and allegedly bruising her wrist, and had a subsequent hospital visit. And the incident involved, it's redacted, but there was a moped being driven by Nicole Clayton and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was driving the moped, and she was a passenger. And the police stopped the moped because it apparently was traveling unsafely, but also because the moped was reported stolen, which is interesting. And so there was an arrest because the moped was reported stolen. And apparently Nicole Clayton got upset. That's what was going on there. And then it says, after viewing the body camera footage and acknowledging that her behavior was inappropriate and that the officers acted professionally, she provided medical documentation regarding her wrist bruising and emotional distress. In a follow-up meeting that the Lieutenant Richards had with her, he discussed the officer's content, decided not to pursue it. The complainant decided not to pursue an explicit formal complaint against the officer, and expressed that while the officer acted lawfully, his demeanor could improve. And Lieutenant Richards communicated her concerns to the officer and closed the complaint file. So that's what we have on that one. And then finally, a person came in person to the Brookline Police Station to file a complaint. And also apparently the next day, June 5th, came to the police station and filed a complaint, but then she also filed the complaint online the following day through the PCAC complaint form, which is interesting. The complaint alleged that unnecessary force and discourteous behavior following a traffic stop. And that's essentially it. The Brookline Police, so the Lieutenant Richards investigated, and okay, so he said that he wasn't able to contact the complainant personally, but he was able to continue with the investigation, and he reviewed the body-worn camera footage, which showed an interaction during a traffic stop where the complainant was uncooperative. It says uncooperative despite multiple requests to return to her vehicle. Officer provided firm demeanor was deemed appropriate given her defiance, including her refusal to comply with requests and shutting the door when he attempted to open it. Footage indicated that her behavior was a safety concern and warranted the officer's response. Brookline police policies of use of force would state that minimal resistance does not constitute excessive force when taken into consideration. It was noted that the officers acted correctly by preventing the complainant from retrieving her ID from the vehicle due to her uncooperative behavior. The report indicates no wrongdoing was committed by the officers. I reviewed the report and this is this is written by the chief, Jennifer Pastor, writing to Charles Carey, the town administrator, about this. Report indicated that no wrongdoing was committed by the officers, and I reviewed the report and evidence and concur with Lieutenant Richards' findings of unfounded or exonerated for all allegations. So she backed him up, basically. It does sound interesting. I personally have the feeling that I don't really know enough about what happened. It would be interesting to see the footage. I also would appreciate clarification perhaps from Superintendent Deputy Superintendent Campbell about the notion of she couldn't retrieve her ID from her vehicle because she was uncooperative. I didn't understand that part at all. Could you explain what would have been going on there?
So every circumstance is a little bit different, but as a general rule, cops don't want people reaching into their car when they've stepped out of their car, because you don't necessarily know. Most of the time they're reaching in to grab a license, but I have had times where there's a weapon in the car and they're reaching near the weapon. And so if someone is out of the vehicle and they say, I want to go get something in the vehicle, the police officer will, generally speaking, retrieve that item for the person.
Okay, interesting. It isn't obvious why the traffic stop occurred in the first place. It's just, I mean, the person might have been speeding, lots of things that have been going on, but it doesn't really say what the traffic stop was about, which I thought was interesting and interesting. I would like knowing more about that. But anyway, okay, so anyway, those are the reports that came in. Those are my thoughts about it. Does anybody else have any thoughts about it? Any of them?
Any of the members or any of the non-voting members wish to comment or ask any questions or not? Yes, please.
A quick question, like in a case that's say withdrawn, and then I don't remember which date it was, but it sounds like the officer acted lawfully, but maybe could have been more courteous. And so that's like feedback in terms of their demeanor. Does that get like tracked anywhere, or is it just like direct feedback to the officer, or does that work its way into some sort of file, or like, so that I'm just curious, like what goes on or how that's handled in the long term.
So Lieutenant Richards would have some sort of documentation on a case like this, and it would note that the officers, which officers were on scene and what the complaint was. Something like this, it would be tracked where the officers have basically been cleared and exonerated. It's not necessarily something that's, to be used against them at some future date, but for sure, when I used to do internal affairs, sometimes you see a pattern of people. A lot of people, want to call you, and it's kind of the same. I don't want to make a complaint. I don't want to do anything, but I do think you should know this about this officer. And if you start to see a pattern, that becomes something that we would look into on our own. So I think that's what you were asking about. And so, yes, that does happen.
Thank you.
So, Paul, I think last time we talked about a situation where one officer ended up having mediation with a civilian because of the interaction that they had. And so in a case like that, would that go into the officer's file, or is that something that you just kind of track similar to what you just discussed?
Yeah, something like that that's resolved through mediation. That is all the way through the process. So that's filed, and yeah, that I guess that's a completed complaint process investigation. So yeah, that's filed, it's documented. And so the report remains, and it's subject to review should there be a future complaint, which really is the case with all of these.
Any other comments or questions up front? Since there's none, we'll move to the next item. Why don't we go back, and, Deputy Superintendent, Campbell and stated that, he had some information on, the bicyclist complaints and how, they're treated by the, Brookline Police Department. Deputy Superintendent, Campbell?
Yeah, I guess I'm not exactly sure what Scott's question was, but, you know, complaints from bicyclists come in, it's the same as, it's the same as any other complaint. It's reviewed for, you know, what the merit is. Did the officer do something wrong? Is there something, maybe not necessarily wrong, but something that we could do better? And when something like these, when complaints like these come in, you know, generally speaking, unless they're really frivolous, the involved officer is spoken to, is questioned about, you know, hey, tell me what happened here. And also the body camera footage is reviewed. I believe in both of these complaints, there was both of the issues raised. I don't think either of them resulted in a formal complaint, but I believe there was video footage in both of them. There was body cam footage in one of them, and the cyclist actually, some of these cyclists have, I don't know, GoPro cameras or whatever the model is. And one of the cyclists had his own video. So it was pretty good information of how the interactions went. As I think you could probably imagine what was written and maybe what the officer's perspective was, weren't entirely in sync. But, you know, these cases are investigated same as every other case. And, you know, if it's deemed that, or if it's learned that we did something wrong or something that we could do better, you know, that is addressed with the officer, and in some cases with the supervisor of the officer, to make sure that, you know, hey, keep an eye on this, you know, this is something that, this is the thing, and, you know, something to be aware of.
Scott,
Yeah.
is that responsive to what you were thinking of?
Yeah, I think my friends who are bicyclists, they commonly say some variation of the fact that they are cited or yelled at or harassed more often than a similar, you know, lawbreaker would in a vehicle, and probably at least some of it is you know, they're out in the open, and so you know, it's a lot easier for someone to yell at them. But I think I would like to hear. It's not something I believe we collect statistics on, and so I don't know if we can substantiate one way or the other. But the allegation that caught my attention here was that the vehicle driver, the car driver, were themselves breaking a law by parking in a bike lane. Again, this isn't my area of expertise, so I don't know if that's the case or not. But the aspect, I think, if the person who filed this complaint were to be watching, the thing that I think they'd want answered is, you know, what is our policy for that? What was in our review of that, was the vehicle driver at fault, and do we have a policy for sort of addressing both sides of the question, both the bicyclists who may or may not have been adhering to the law, as well as the cars who, you know, do at times put bicyclists in danger by doing some of these things.
Yeah, so I can give you just a little bit of background for people who aren't familiar with the facts of what this was, but essentially it was an Uber driver on Beacon Street, and he pulled over. I don't know if he pulled over and he was picking somebody up or if he was waiting somebody. It's not entirely clear to me, but he had clearly pulled over, and but he wasn't parked. He had just pulled over, but he had stopped in the bike lane, and so a cyclist was riding down Beacon Street and was not able to continue into the bike lane. So the cyclist pulled out into Beacon Street. When he drove by Beacon Street, he was frustrated that this person had stopped in the bike lane. So he smacked the car with his hand, not with his bike, but he smacked the car that the Uber driver was in. This, as I'm sure you can imagine, pissed off the Uber driver. So the cyclist drove away, and the Uber driver drove after the cyclist. And then he pulls up next to the cyclist, rolls down the window, and they're yelling at each other back and forth. Now, the allegation was that the Uber driver was at some point attempted to ram him, and I think the complaint actually says they tried to commit vehicular murder. There was an independent witness who had seen what had happened, who said that was not true. The cyclist was extremely angry, acknowledged that he had rode by and that he had smacked this person's car, and was very, very frustrated by this, but also had been riding, I think, for a while and had 2 near misses earlier in the evening or prior to this interaction. And I think this was just the one where he was like, I've had enough of this, and expressed a general frustration with people not treating the bike lanes, people not being responsive to staying out of the bike lanes, which forces cyclists to have to ride into Beacon Street. The officers showed up. They did speak with both parties. It was essentially, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, it was essentially a road rage incident. 2 people got very frustrated. They were yelling and swearing at each other, and not really a crime per se. Is it possible that a parking ticket could have been written, or I don't even know if it's a parking ticket or a moving violation? I guess so. The officers weren't there. They didn't witness the violation. The cyclists expressed real frustration with the fact that, we're not writing more tickets for bicycle lane violations. I'm sure there's merit to that. Being a police officer in this town, there's a whole push-pull thing on citations. A lot of people will say we're writing too many citations. We should be writing fewer citations. It should only be, when it's really, really necessary. And then other people will say we need to ramp up enforcement. And a lot of the officers on the street are in a little bit of a no-win situation. But having said that, I know that the cyclists, a frequent complaint is that the cyclists are not protected as well as they would like to be by law enforcement. And, I can't say that that's, not a valid concern. In this individual particular instance, there wasn't a whole lot more for the officers to do. They kept the peace. They spoke with both sides, and, in the end, they sent both parties on their way.
Just out of curiosity, who was it who called the police?
It was the cyclist.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I can see anytime someone is chasing after a cyclist in a car, I think I would be a little worried as the cyclist, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Uber driver's point of view was, hey, don't smack my car, which did happen. And that comes from the cyclist that he did it.
I mean, I will say, just as a car driver myself, I've at least on one occasion had a bicyclist in my blind spot who I didn't see, and I will say I appreciated the slap in that case because I honestly didn't see them. But in this case, this was something different. Yeah, I guess, my mild request, and I don't know exactly how to do this, is just to give our bicycling friends the assurance that we do take those seriously. And I don't know how to substantiate that other than, like in our, yeah, I don't know if there's statistics we can keep or some kind of assurance we can give that the fact that we do actually look into those incidents. But thanks for addressing it, Deputy.
I'll just mention that in my time in Brookline, which is approaching 40 years, I do much more cycling than driving. I like to bicycle around, so I tend to identify very strongly with bicyclists. I haven't found it so much in Brookline, but in policing in general. I mean, well, okay, I can get into the fact that when I first came to Boston and started bicycling, bicycles were not so accepted at all. And actually joined one of the movements to make bicycling more prominent and establish bike lanes and that kind of a thing. But I still consider it to be kind of an ongoing journey about the balance between what you do with cars and what you do with bicycles. And also I also have some concerns about, I'll call it the quality of bike lanes. The fact that there are bike lanes are good, but they aren't always designed in the best way, especially because they're an afterthought. So that's another thing that's going on there. But as a cyclist, I have generally found that police officers in the region, not particularly Brookline, don't take cyclists as seriously as they take motor vehicle drivers, and that can be frustrating at times. That was a bit of a ramble, but I just wanted to say that.
Just a tangent and just an add-on about parking in the bike lanes. So there are bus lanes now in Brookline. I live in Brookline Village, and I just took the 66, and people are parking in the bus lanes. So something has to be done. You know, the T is trying to make things more efficient for the T, and to have people take the public transportation, but people are parking in the bus lanes, that doesn't help. And it's the same thing for the bicyclists. You know, if they're parking in the bike lanes, that doesn't help the bicyclists. And it's the same thing for public transportation. And I think the police department should look at it to see, you know, what can be done to encourage people not to do that anymore. You know, even temporary, because it just backs up traffic.
Are you saying parking in the bus lanes or driving in the?
Parking. They just stop and they'll park there.
Okay, in the village?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Oh, I was thinking the new bus lane, but that's in the middle of the street. Yeah, which bus lane are you?
The 66. I
So,
was from
just past the fire station?
to Union Square.
Okay,
But anyways, that's a tangent. So we've discussed this, exhausted this topic, I gather. Okay, so there are topics of interest of each of the PCAC members, and I'm just going to run down through that to see if there's any reports from those members. Juvenile operations and Kimberly Richardson, she's nodding her head. She does not have a report. Ron Wilkinson, do you have any report on the biannual assessment of?
yeah, I'm planning to make, to set up a time in the next week or two, with, Ray Richards and Internal Affairs to go over the next batch of unredacted reports.
Okay,
So-
great. And Scott and Adian, do you have any report on existing police data systems?
Paul, before we do that, if I could just
Oh, sure. Yeah.
interject just really quick, Ron. I don't know what your timeline is, but Ray Richards is probably only around for a couple more weeks. He's scheduled for deployment. He'll be gone for probably 15 months.
Yeah,
So-
okay, yeah. The last information I had was he was going to be available for the next 2 weeks, and I was going to set up a time, but I'll make sure I get that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, I didn't want you to think you had time and the clock run out.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for that information.
Yeah.
That's valuable. Okay, you got it?
Yep.
All right, you gotta finish it, okay? Okay, going back to Scott. Scott,
Yeah, I didn't get a response from my initial scheduling email that I sent it. I haven't really followed up. I've been out of town for most of the past month. But I will poke David and David Nick, I think, were the ones who had talked to before, and see if we can get something set up.
Thank you, Scott. And John Hillard on artificial intelligence options in policing and record keeping.
Yeah, I have a longer update, so I have some slides I can share.
Oh,
to walk
great.
through.
Sure.
Yes.
Do you need to share the screen?
Yeah, I tried earlier. Let me see if it still works.
You do with Sarah. I don't know how to do it. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. Boy, that's
Hopefully
great.
People can see.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, of course. So I'll try to keep this quick.
No, take your time. Please.
Yeah, I can talk too much, so I will try to keep it brief in general. So yeah, just prepared this report to kind of give a little bit of an overview of some of the research I've been doing and meetings that I've had and just in the last few months as it relates to AI and policing, and in particular in Brookline. So just a little bit of context, I think it's worth disclosing, you know, like I'm a town meeting member, precinct 11, a member of the PCAC. I've been focused on AI, but I'm not involved in law enforcement or law or anything related to that. So just context out there. And then, yeah, transparently, I tried to make this very neutral, but and I've donated to various digital rights advocacy organizations in the past, so I do have a point of view, but I've tried to keep this very grounded in sort of the facts, and so just disclosing that, so it's not necessarily hidden. So I wanted to summarize, I covered this last meeting. I had a great meeting with David Pilgrim, maybe a month or two ago. He's the director of technology, and he gave me a rundown of sort of the overall use of the technical systems within the department, but also AI. The punchline from this discussion was right now we're not really using generative AI tools at all, especially in sort of policing or administration. I suppose there's probably applications that might be very light or in PR or social media, but in general, no real AI usage that he was aware of, and really using any AI cloud systems in any substantial way would violate policies that they already have against, exposing personal data or things of that nature. So right now, very little. There are some vendors who have AI add-ons and things like that. Maybe there's discussions happening to enable that in the future, but that's not, there's nothing concrete as of yet. So that's something where we could continue to monitor into the future. But right now there's really nothing. And so I'm covering some topics in this presentation that are somewhat theoretical, because right now, we're not really using this in substantial ways. So just to put that out there. Last meeting, Scott and I kind of gave context from town meeting that the CIO had given some context around AI in general. So I do have an update on that. In June 25th, there was a meeting with the Human Resources Board, and the draft AI policy for the town was shared. So I took a look at that today, and it's really good. There's some good stuff in there. I would say from an IT perspective and sort of a policy perspective, it's really focused on data protection. Like what can you put into it? What should you not put into it? How should you use it? How to handle copyrights, security. So I would say it really covers the basics of use of generative AI within the town. My feeling, though, is it does leave some room for a policing specific policy that is more tailored toward the potential products that our department could be being pitched by and potentially leveraging. So very brief update. I think I just looked at this for the first time today, so there's more to read into it, but the town does have a policy that's being worked on. I see. Anne, did you raise your hand?
Why don't you finish
Okay.
your presentation,
All right.
and then we can go to the people who has their hands raised.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to give a little context, like why, this is something that we should care about as a committee. I think there's two big things. One is I see a huge potential upside of this type of technology in terms of efficiency and potentially doing more with less. A lot of the AI team marketing uses the term force multiplier. You'll see it all over the place in all these tools, in that like police departments nationwide are short-staffed, they're underfunded. This is a strain everywhere, and that better tools to make stuff like report writing faster can, really, really, really help. So I think there's something it's worth understanding if that could help us or not. Not necessarily our call, but in terms of allowing that and putting the guardrails in place, I do think starts to be interesting for us. The other side of it is potential downside related to rights. AI in policing is not just a version upgrade. It's not just like a little change in terms of the tools that the police could use. It could make very serious legal and criminal procedure changes in terms of like how we think about, report writing and narratives and all of that. On the right, there's a screenshot from a useful paper. And one of the things that I highlighted is that these reports that police write, they're the lifeblood of these processes, and that as these tools get adopted, the traditional practice is really going to change a lot. These tools they're not just a little change. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. What first got my attention was the ACO published a white paper last year. And their perspective is they're not shy about it. The headline of this was police departments shouldn't allow officers to use AI to draft police reports. That's their current statement. That's the top highlight. If you read through at the bottom, they leave a little bit of wiggle room where there are situations where I think you can use these tools in a way that is not sort of harmful to people's liberties and not as disruptive to the legal process, which might include very specific ways of using AI and very specific ways of not using AI. And that's something we'll get into a little bit further. But that's their take. It's a useful paper for, I think, the committee just to peruse if they're interested in it. They'll be linked in this deck. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit sort of generically now. As it relates to data, this is sort of an established kind of way of thinking about data. On the bottom, you've got data, and at the top, you've got this fuzzy word called wisdom. And you're working your way up the pyramid from very, very concrete fact-based data. It might be, something captured on a camera to something very high level and aggregated and understood. And I think my perspective is on the bottom of the pyramid, that's where a lot of traditional IT systems have been focused. We want to collect data. We want it to be reliable. We don't want to lose it. We need backups. And it's just about having the data. And over time, and it's been accelerating, the tools that we have are working their way up this pyramid. And we're getting to a point now where you can paste in a bunch of data and have AI just look at it and give you a conclusion. And that's been the type of thing normally that we, reserve for human judgment. Someone who is at the scene, looking, having the interaction, we leave that kind of conclusion, that sort of wisdom to the officer at the scene. And there's more move toward having tools do that. And so I think as we move up that pyramid, there's risks, of like noise, error accumulation for sure. If the fundamental data isn't strong, the conclusion reached also isn't strong because it's based on bad data. This would be garbage in, garbage out from like a system perspective. Also, the risks change. At the bottom, as IT people, we're concerned around the quality of our data and the integrity and is it reliable and backed up. But as you get further up, there's different risks that are newer. Hallucinations. AI should sometimes make things up. Biases. The tool that you use itself is biased. You don't have to just think around bias training for your officers. You have to think around bias training for the tools that you use. And so the ways that we think around this need to evolve because the policies that we have are just not thinking around tools and systems that have these types of risks. And so I think this is why it's so interesting and important for us to be at least contemplating these types of situations, even if we're not using these tools today. High level, there are a lot of different categories for tooling and systems that use AI within law enforcement. So at a high level, I broke this down into 3 main buckets. I also borrowed some bucketing from this NYU breakdown. So there's policing, administrative, and then sort of public relations. I think where, at the bottom, community and public relations, I think if police departments are using Canva to create slides for Instagram, probably we don't care as much. There's not as much at stake. Those aren't legally binding documents or police reports that are affecting people's lives in the same way that a arrest narrative might. On the top, there's policing, which I've sort of bucketed as like, facial recognition, automated license plate readers, GPS monitoring, gunshot detection, predictive policing models. That has not been on my radar at all. I haven't started thinking about that, but it is a key use case. This is what vendors are selling for sure. And then what I have been looking into more is this administrative option using generative AI in particular report writing. So one feeling I have, and we could discuss it, is that I think if we continue this line of inquiry, it might be worth broadening our scope into some of these other areas to see, like, is our policy kind of comprehensive enough to handle these different types of uses of AI, and do we have a perspective on them? So I'm just going to talk mostly about report writing, and I want to go over a few key use cases and tools in the market already, just to give a sense of what's happening. To jump into it, I found actually one of the best ways is just to look at how it's being marketed today. The one I see referenced the most is from Axon. They make body cameras and also tasers, and they also make the software for automating reports. And so if you click this video, I'm not going to show it now, but the sort of pitch is, in public safety, every second matters. Why do officers spend up to 3 hours a day writing reports? So I personally have some issues with that framing, but the pitch is probably very compelling to a lot of people. It's like, okay, why do we have so many people spending time writing reports? And their perspective is they can take what usually takes an hour and do it in a few seconds or, a few minutes or something like that. And so it's a very compelling pitch. Here is how it works. There's a link to this in the slides, but this is from, I think, a police department in Colorado, and they show the exact use case and the tool itself. So an officer would, engage their body-worn camera that's on the top left, and they, will be talking and interacting with people. They go back to the station and dock the camera. The whole interaction is transcribed the same way that this meeting itself will be transcribed using AI. It is very good. The transcription itself is quite good, even in noisy environments. It can struggle in some situations where there's people speaking with very heavy accents or things like that, but in general, it's quite good. And then on the bottom right, after you have that whole transcription, you basically say, what type of interaction was this? In this case, it was like a property crime, and they click generate report. And then in the end, the entire narrative is automatically generated. And the officer is just saying, how many words do you want? How descriptive do you want the report to be? And there's a few placeholders in there that they might change. In the end, the officer needs to check that they reviewed it and that they swear that it's accurate and all that. But the heavy lifting here is really being done by the AI software directly from the transcription. And so that's the draft one experience, and that's where some of these products seem to be going. And I think that's where some of the civil liberties and digital freedom type organizations have some issues, because it's going direct from the transcription, no context really, into a report. So I'm going to go through a couple of use cases, and then I'll try to wrap up quickly. So Fort Collins, and they're on a spectrum. So this is a very, very positive one. They have 40 officers participating in it. They say it's brought down their report writing time by 67%, and it's saving thousands of hours of time. So this is very positive. I will note that this is an article, I think it was in CBS News. It's also cited on Axon's website. It's essentially a testimonial. So it's extremely positive. This is on one extreme of very good feedback that they've gotten. This is another fairly positive one from Oklahoma City. The officer wrote, it was a better report than I could have ever written. It was 100% accurate. It flowed better, Gilbert said. It even documented a fact I did not remember hearing. Another officer's mention of the color of the car from the suspects ran from. So it's like, to me, this raises a red flag in and of itself. One, maybe multiple red flags. One, I don't necessarily know that the quality of report and the wording is what's important per se, but I don't really know that. But then also the fact that in this case, the AI itself is adding details that the officer wasn't aware of. And that can cause other issues and complications in terms of what is a report and whose observation was it, and like what exactly is being reported. So in the grand scheme of things, this was a positive review. The article made no mention of this nuance, but overall positive from Oklahoma City. On the other extreme, Seattle-King County has basically banned this type of technology altogether. And this comes from the district attorney in that county, I believe. The punchline was that in one example, an otherwise excellent report included a reference to an officer who was not at the scene. So the AI had some kind of hallucination. It said, Officer Yee was on the scene, Officer Yee was not there. And that creates a huge issue for ultimately the prosecution of this case. And so at this point in that jurisdiction or in that county, they don't use this technology at all anymore. And then one last other perspective that I think is worth having here is this is not necessarily universally believed to be more efficient. So it could seem that like having, you put in your camera and it just writes all the reports for you. It seems that should be a lot more efficient, but there's been some research and also the findings from the Anchorage Police Department that it actually didn't save time. And so it's not universally saving time for everybody. Depending on how it works in your process and how you use it, it might not be that beneficial. So overall, it's a mixed bag. So you've got the risks of using it, but then also the questionable reality of if it will help or not. So this is more just a summary of guardrails and principles for safe use that I've seen at this point. So a big one is disclosure, meaning like, if you used AI to generate the report, it should say that very clearly. And it should also say like, which parts were written by the officer, which parts by AI, et cetera, et cetera. The second big thing that I've seen advocated for is audit trails. So being able to see the first thing that was generated by the AI, then how it was edited, and sort of being able to track it through that process, so you don't just have a final result and then that creates some ambiguity of who is responsible for what. Certainly oversight has been a big theme in sort of the safe use of this type of technology. Essentially, like, if you use it, it still needs to be reviewed and looked at by other officers in sort of the chain of command ultimately. A common other thing I've seen is certain departments will say you can use this AI for kind of like low stakes cases, but if it's like a big case or something that's going to be more complicated, or like a felony, or I don't exactly know, but something more serious, you have to do it manually. And so it can remove some of the grunt work for maybe like lower stakes cases, but then you still have higher fidelity and human written reports in cases where it's going to be really critical. Certainly training, it goes without saying probably, and then processes like this committee for community oversight is a theme as well. And so last real slide here is sort of my thinking on how we can keep going forward, should we choose to. I think we should keep AI on the agenda, and my sense is it's worth broadening the scope a little bit just to include other tools that could help be efficient, help efficiency overall, but then also might have implications for, how people are policed in the community. I think getting a sense of how, tools like this can be used in our department, I think is important. I've seen that there are a lot of policies and boilerplate policies that we can start to look at. So I would say reviewing those and getting a sense of what could work for us, and if there's something that we should be adopted would be really useful. And I can imagine drafting an AI use policy specifically for the Brookline Police Department. Tactically, since there are multiple stakeholders in such a decision like this, we might as well know if our prosecutors or district attorney are already against this. It's like, I guess there's we don't need to invest more time in it. So it would be worth knowing that ahead of time. And then one other just random thing that I have seen come up once or twice is that, like, if using such tools would have dramatic implications for how much like workforce is needed. Like say for like, we have 4 officers and that we have 4 spots that we can't fill because we don't have budgetary issue. We don't have the budget for it. But if we use this AI, we actually don't need those. That could have some complications with a collective bargaining or whatever. I don't really know, but it's like, it's worth being aware of, like, how such tools could, if we're saying you're going to be super efficient, how they could play, with other budgetary considerations like that. So the last slide is just a bunch of references for anybody who uses these slides and looks at it. But yeah, that's all I wanted to cover for this particular topic. Happy to field any questions.
Nice job.
Thank you, John. What I'll do is, I think Ann Braga had her hand raised up first. I see Scott's hand raised, and then after that, I'll take other people who have any questions or comments. Ann Braga,
Good evening, everyone. Ann Braga, HR Director for the town. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of the comments made in the presentation. The presentation that was done to the HR board is related to employee practices townwide, and we have been working with the town's HR and IT department have worked together to look at this, and we are beta testing some IT programs related to AI. And the basis around all of this is really looking at a vetting process for any department on any AI capabilities before, and having that run through IT or in coordination with IT before any department or the town writ large were to adopt use of it. And so the first step of that is the AI policy that was brought before the HR department or the HR board. And but that is not the only AI activity that is going on within town departments. And so it is a multi-pronged process as far as that. And we want to make sure that any department who's looking at AI is looking at it in coordination and collaboration with our central IT folks to provide the IT content, and then where it is departmentally specific, in this case with police, that basis of knowledge is being looked at through both lenses, and we're not looking at one to the exclusion of the other.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, I thought I'd provide a little context from my experience at the Wikimedia Foundation, where we've been working with AI tools before they were called AI, right? So this is AI. The large language models at the basis here are also the model used for machine learning, which we've used at Wikipedia for a long time to find spam and vandalism and whatnot. They're also the basis of machine translation, modern machine translation tools, which we already use in the department. As a election warden, I was present in Precinct 7 in the most recent election, where we had a voter come in who didn't speak English well. I think their native language was Russian. They were asking for some help. We didn't have anyone who spoke Russian available, and the officer on duty at the precinct used a translation tool on their phone to assist the voter, which is great. But a lot of these cautions, I think, apply to all these tools, and I think it's worth keeping them in mind. AIs have implicit bias. The way I usually describe this is AIs reflect the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be. And so if most doctors are male, it will translate doctor using the male gender term in the language by default. And it takes a lot of work. And we've done a lot of work at Wikipedia. There are tricks you can do with your machine learning models to sort of correct for some of those biases of the world as it is after the fact by controlling the training data that comes in. And it's important to remember the difference between the world as it is and the world the way we want it to be, right? Because that's where a lot of this bias comes in. So if a lot of cars that are cited happen to be run down, the machine learning model will learn that rundown cars are more likely to be cited and be more likely to cite a rundown car. And we'd say, well, that doesn't have, the condition of your car shouldn't make any difference into whether or not you broke the law, but that is what the machine learning model will implicitly learn. And so and I think that's worth noting for all these tools that we have. Translation tools, same thing. It's something you need to be aware of, something we're aware of in our policing with implicit bias training and other things. And as John stated, I think it's worth training that as we use these tools, that we be aware that they are, as biased as any other officer, probably more so because they don't have the benefit of self-reflection to understand where those biases come out. The other thing which I think was really useful in John's presentation, and probably the most useful part of the proposed ACLU policy, was preserving the original sources. AIs do have hallucinations. They make a set of words which probabilistically, it thought made sense, but it can go off on the rails, especially when people are saying things which it doesn't expect them to say. Preserving the original source is the antidote. The important part of that policy was, if you use AI for a transcription, that you also make sure you have the original source so that you can actually verify, if it's important, whether or not someone actually said the thing that they said. If the AI flags that the officer mentioned the color of the car, and I can go back to the original source and verify that that's what they said, the thing that is useful was the original source. And I think that's important. It's something we do with the transcripts of this meeting, of course. The recording of this meeting is kept as well as the transcript. And certainly I've looked at the transcript in many cases where it's unusable, but the original source is still there. It's worth noting for an officer that you will be embarrassed, right? If you rely on the AI learning model or the AI transcription or the AI generated report, at some point, if you're doing best practices and maintaining the original source, someone will go back to the original source and find out that your report is wrong in a way that you weren't careful enough reading to check. I don't think it's necessarily bad if you're embarrassed once in a while. I mean, if the trade-off is worth it, but it is something that you need to keep in mind. Usually, most places that have AI have weasel wording around a report that says this report was partially automatically generated, may not be accurate, blah, 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 blah. But it is worth keeping in mind what it means for the reputation of the people using it. Something will slip through. It is very AIs are very good at generating plausible reading text, and so things read very well, and it's very hard. This is again experience from Wikipedia, where we are proofreading content which editors submit, which is partially AI generated all the time. It is really hard to find the mistakes in it because the AI writes it very well, right? And so if you use AI in your process, you will at some point be embarrassed when the AI sticks something in that didn't happen or was wrong, and you should have a process in place for dealing with that. And again, that includes translation tools these days, because translation tools are also powered by AI models. And when John mentioned, using it for community relations, it's great if we can outreach to more communities by using automatic transcriptions or automatic translation tools or making our content available in more languages. But at some point, it will say something which is not what we said. And we should have a process in place to deal with that, and weigh whether the reputation risk is worth the risk of it. In many cases, it may be worthwhile to outreach to the communities more than the reputation we risk when we get something wrong once in a while. But it's something that needs to be done. Traffic cameras, I think, are another use here, which John didn't mention, partly because it's still banned by state law. But should the state allow them, traffic cameras are also powered by these same sort of models, and they do, as I mentioned, they have biases like the type of car can subtly influence how well it reads the license plate, and you can get it will be trained on more data from a certain type of car, and that can introduce biases in who you issue tickets to. The other thing is optical character recognition. If you're just scanning a document, again, these are powered by the same large language models. And you'd be surprised at Wikipedia, we have a project called Wikisource, which is just transcriptions of historic documents, more or less. But you'll be surprised that you'll get hallucinations in that as well, because it's powered by the same language model. And so it will be, transcribing normal, and then suddenly there's just something that's off the wall that just happens. And we need to start having policies that can take that into account. Again, a lot of this is just sort of reaffirming things that John said from my experience at the Wikipedia Foundation, using a lot of these technologies and having them be used by our volunteers. More words is not necessarily more good. As John said, AIs have a very particular writing style, which can be actually harder to read. It flows well, but it can be more verbose, use more complicated words than people would normally. And I don't know if the officer's supervisor is going to necessarily appreciate all the complicated words the officer is suddenly using in the report, right? We've seen a sort of escalation here where the more AI is used to generate the email or the report, then the people one level above who have to read those things then suddenly feel like they need to use AI just to read them, because suddenly all the officers are submitting 5,000 word reports, and who can manage to read all that stuff, right? So that is something to be very cautious of. I would rather the officer write 300 words in their own words that are things that they actually remember than have to deal with 5,000 words of a very professionally written but hard to digest AI generated thing. It's also worth noting that we've seen to some degree a diversity or a racial component to this, where writers of certain ethnicities will feel like they need to use AI tools to have their writing appear whiter, right? Like it uses the fancy words that they associate with the upper class. And to the extent there are class distinctions in policing as well, I think that is something to be aware of, and maybe even just to reassure officers that we don't actually need them to write in a kind of fancy AI style. That our standard for writing police reports is their authentic words and authentic voice, not some sort of upper class white voice, I guess. That's something that we've seen, especially in education situations where students sort of feel compelled to AIify their own words in order to make it sound like what they think is correct. The last thing I'll just mention is pricing lock-in. We're in a point of the AI bubble, I'll say, where the prices are not reflective of the actual computational cost of some of these things, and to be aware that any pricing we get on AI products right now is sort of by definition too good to be true. And so to the extent that we can take advantage of that, that's great, but we should also keep in mind the long-term costs of this are likely to be significantly higher once prices actually match the computational price of the tools that are being provided. And I guess just in summary, my TLDR is that the details matter. Like that one little sentence in John's AI policy about keeping the original source is actually like the bedrock of the entire thing in terms of making a trustworthy system that incorporates some AI, and that we should be very careful to focus on those details as we craft policies here. Thanks.
Scott, anybody else wish to either comment or ask John any questions? None? John, did you want to respond to anything that Ann or Scott may have said, or just clarify?
No, I think to me, it's helpful, the context that I think keeping the town like policy, like the way I see sort of town stuff interacting with police department stuff is like, I think they can work really well together, where it's like the town level can think around data protection, security, procurement, like, and vetting. And like the police level policy can be really more focused on criminal procedure and like the rights and how it interacts specifically with tools at the policing level. And then, yeah, Scott has way more experience with the AI, and I don't work on that. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of like figuring out how to take our best practices from years and years and years of police work and how to adapt it for not like the sort of modern AI tooling. And I think if we can do that, where there's audit trails and chains of custody, as it relates to reports and stuff, I think we'll be in a much better place. I think the principles still stand. It just requires adapting to the latest technology.
You wish to comment anything, Deputy Superintendent Paul Campbell?
Not much. I thought the presentation was very good. It was interesting to see everything that you put in there. It looks like you put a lot of work into it. I appreciate it. I'm interested in this topic and how AI, we don't really have much AI. The only AI stuff that I've really seen is people use it for cover letters. And so I see AI written cover letters all that, we hire interns, we'll get, 30, 40, 50 resumes and cover letters. And every once in a while you'll see a cover letter and it will say, I'm interested in this position because of my experience with, and then in parentheses, insert experience here, which every once in a while people will forget. So,
yeah, that's certainly where we're seeing the arms race first, is people are using AI to write resumes, and then the HR people are using AI to read resumes. And so it's like the machines are talking to each other, and you don't get to a real person until several levels down now.
But no, I appreciate all the work, John, that you put into that. I thought it was interesting.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. Our next item is ICE in Brookline. Any updates, Deputy Superintendent Campbell?
So nothing new to report, no activity that I am aware of since our last meeting.
Okay. And moving to the next item is any discussion of future topics or agenda items? Nothing? And our next meeting.
I guess I'll make I don't know if I need to formally make this, but I'll make the request for another ICE update next meeting, just because I think it's likely to be of ongoing interest.
Thank you. And our next meeting that we have is September 29th, 2025. We're skipping August because of vacation and everything, okay? Right, and anybody have anything else to bring up, before the PCAC? There's nothing else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, if I
Scott's
could,
hands up.
Yes, Scott?
sorry, if I could just briefly, I know the chairs prepared a statement on the incident with the
Mm.
holding. If they would, I think it would be useful just to put that statement on public record, so that we're not ignoring it entirely in this meeting.
I believe the statement's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, but I can still read it, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so, this relates to the, death of a person in Brooklyn, police custody. And the death is under investigation by the Norfolk County, District Attorney's Office, as well as an internal investigation by the Brookline Police Department. And there is nothing to report or comment on at this time. We expect more information will be available when these investigations are completed. That's it.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks.
Anything else, to come before the PCAC? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody? Please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Hey, John, move to adjourn. Second, is that,
Scott,
Scott?
sure.
Okay, second, my Scott,
Aye.
adjourn? Aye,
Hi.
John. Joe, excuse
Aye.
me.
Scott
John
Matty and I.
and Scott and Kimberly, and Chair says aye. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night all.